Hello again. I need hardly say that I was immensely irritated the other week when YouTube suspended me for a week for posting a video in which I did nothing but quote from the British government's own website, along with things which Public Health Scotland had said, and also some statements from the Joint Committee for Vaccinations and Immunisations, the group of scientists who advise the government. To be suspended for spreading medical misinformation under such circumstances struck me as utterly bizarre. However, I do have some sympathy with YouTube because they find themselves in a very tricky position lately. This has hardly been helped by the recent murder of an MP, leading to calls for a David's Law, which would prevent or greatly restrict people from being able to post stuff online anonymously. This is not a new idea. It's been suggested before, and the feeling that something of the kind is needed has been gaining strength lately. The online safety bill, which it is hoped will prevent people sharing naked images of former partners, among other things, is working its way through Parliament currently. Some people are saying that ridding the internet of anonymous comments and the ability to be abusive to people without them knowing who you are should be added to it before it finally becomes law. This is, of course, a spectacularly foolish idea. The idea of anybody really trying to control the internet is completely ludicrous, but there we are. The scheme would be that anybody signing up with a social media site would be required to prove who they were with photo ID, such as a passport or driving licence. Then, if they said anything racist or homophobic or encouraged other people to carry out assassinations and so on, it would be easy to find their name and address. Sites like YouTube, Twitter and Facebook would then have a legal duty to police such a system and keep a list of everybody's names and addresses, and could then be fined if they failed to do so. Imagine all the extra staff that would need and the cost entailed. You can quite see why Twitter and Facebook are horrified at such an idea. Even without compulsory checks on identity, the online safety bill, which is set to become law soon, will change the nature of social media in Britain, or so it is planned. Ofcom will have responsibility for making sure that social media sites like this do not upset or offend anybody. Yes, the government will now be able to check that nothing I say on here is likely to cause anybody to gasp, be astonished, or indeed presumably to laugh. All content on YouTube, Twitter and elsewhere will then be government approved. Companies which do allow harmful content, and by the way, that is content judged harmful, not in legal terms, but rather as a government department defines the word harm, which is very, very vague. They'll be able to be fined up to £18 million for each breach of the law. So in other words, if Ofcom was to decide that one of my videos was harmful or offensive or something of that sort, YouTube would then be liable to be fined millions of pounds for letting me post it. You can imagine how nervous all this is making YouTube at the moment. What they are doing, in a desperate bid to avert the catastrophe of state control, which is what this would amount to, is to show that they are more than capable of regulating their own affairs. They're doing this by coming down hard on people who laugh about the current narrative on anything, from global warming to COVID, from immigration to Islam. I seriously doubt that YouTube actually believe in or even care about all the stuff they have in their community guidelines, but it is designed to demonstrate to the British government that they are trying their best to prevent abuse against or harm to anybody. This is why YouTube has been so strict lately and why they suspended me for smiling while reading out some statistics which the British government themselves had released. There's also a debate to be had about the effect of requiring people to identify themselves online. Some people, whistleblowers, victims of persecution and violence and so on, actually need to remain anonymous. Then too, there are 3.5 million people in Britain who don't have either passports, driving licences or any other sort of photo ID. Any attempt to ensure that everybody having a social media account has to furnish the site with such identification would automatically exclude millions of poor and marginalised people from Facebook and Instagram, which would be an awful state of affairs. It is in this context that we must look at the people who are being suspended by YouTube. They are, in a sense, being backed into a corner by the British government, and I can see that they might feel that the game's not worth the candle and just prefer not to operate anymore in this country if the law goes ahead. Just why a conservative government in London is behaving like the communist government in China in trying to control and manipulate the internet is an interesting point, and one to which I hope to devote a video in the near future.